The couple was the center of attention in the town. All sorts of people were calling in with clues and leads, but none of it made any sense. The tired father didn't want to talk to anybody. He was angry. How could something like this happen on his watch? He had to find his child. Jacob Merriweather had always been a quiet man, a devoted father, and a diligent employee. His world revolved around his daughter, Alyssa, who brought joy and challenges alike. 17-year-old Alyssa Merriweather was a brilliant but troubled student, grappling with bipolar disorder. She had a strict routine that involved school, therapy, and her medication. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the small town of Pemberton, Ohio. It was a normal morning as people busied themselves for work. It was an average, quiet Thursday morning when Alyssa was reported missing. Concerned faces gathered in the school office, anxiety palpable in the air. Had anybody seen her? On that fateful Thursday morning, Jacob received a call that would send his world into a tailspin. It was Alyssa's school principal reporting her missing. Another student said that they saw her arrive at school, but she never entered, he said solemnly. Panic surged through him as he remembered how sad she was at home the previous night. A sickening dread settled in his stomach. The whole day Jacob searched the town for his daughter, but he had no luck. Friday came, but Alyssa didn't. Jacob knew that his daughter's condition required her medication and constant care. His anxiety grew, and he wasted no time in contacting the police, well aware that the first 24 hours were critical. Did anybody know of her whereabouts? Alyssa's father, Jacob, paced nervously in the waiting room. His usually composed demeanor was shattered by the worry etched across his face. She could be anywhere, alone, cold, hungry, he thought. Alyssa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and her medication was essential for her well-being. She had never disappeared like this before. Where could she be? As Friday morning unfolded, Jacob couldn't shake the fear that gripped him. He glanced out the window, his eyes falling on his neighbor's house. His daughter still wasn't found. Mrs. Henderson was usually reliable about bringing in her morning newspaper, but it still lay untouched on her doorstep. Curiosity compelled him to investigate further. He got dressed and went for a walk. The clock ticked relentlessly, and as Friday dawned, Alyssa still hadn't returned home. Jacob's anxiety deepened. He stood outside his house watching people go by their daily work. He knew that every passing moment without her medication was a risk to her health and stability. Did anybody know where his daughter was? What had happened to her? Jacob's thoughts raced as he dialed the police station's number. He reported Alyssa's disappearance a day ago, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and desperation. The officer on the other end assured him they would do everything they could to find her. But what could they do if they didn't find her yet? After talking to the authorities, Jacob noticed something unusual. His neighbor, an elderly woman named Sandra, still hadn't brought her newspaper inside. Concerned for her, he decided to check on her, hoping for any news of Alyssa. He stood outside watching her every move. She never ever went anywhere. It was strange to see her walking around. Jacob stepped out of his house and cautiously made his way to the Henderson residence. Peering through the window, he was taken aback by what he saw. As he approached Sandra's house, he saw her struggling with heavy grocery bags. Curiosity got the better of him, and he couldn't help but glance at the items she was carrying. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who seldom ventured far from home, was inside the house, packing groceries onto her kitchen counter. His heart sank as he recognized several boxes of Cap'n Crunch, Alyssa's all-time favorite cereal. Among them were a few boxes of Cap'n Crunch, Alyssa's favorite cereal. He was immediately transported to memories of eating breakfast with his daughter. Rushing back home, he relayed this peculiar sighting to his wife, Emily. Tears welled up in her eyes as they shared their worries about Alyssa. "I miss her so much. Everything reminds me of her," Jacob confessed, his voice quivering with emotion. Emily put a comforting hand on his shoulder, sharing his pain. "We'll find her, Jacob. I promise." Jacob felt weak and helpless. His heart ached at the sight of that cereal. Memories of breakfasts with his daughter flooded his mind. Jacob stayed at home, his eyes filled with tears, and told his wife how much he missed Alyssa's presence in their lives. They waited in the lounge, looking out the window for their precious baby girl to return. The following morning, as Jacob gazed out of his window, his eyes fell upon Mrs. Henderson once again. She was leaving her house and heading for the supermarket, but this time her cart was filled with various snacks, sweets, and more cereal. Jacob found himself growing suspicious. Why would an elderly woman suddenly indulge in so much junk food? The next morning, he watched Sandra returning from the supermarket again, this time with an assortment of snacks, chocolates, and sweets. Was she expecting company? He couldn't understand why an elderly lady would consume so much junk food. Suspicion began to gnaw at him. Why would an old lady follow such an unhealthy diet? As the days passed, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with Mrs. Henderson. It was the first time she had been so active out of the house. Each morning, he watched her leave for the supermarket, returning with bags upon bags of sugary treats. His concern for his daughter deepened, and a nagging suspicion clawed at the edges of his mind. Something didn't feel right. Unable to endure the uncertainty any longer, Jacob decided to take matters into his own hands. That fateful morning, he whispered to Emily, "I'm going to follow Mrs. Henderson. Something doesn't add up, and I need to know." Emily nodded, her anxiety mirroring his own. "Just be careful, Jacob." He put on all black clothes as a disguise and went outside. Jacob's anxiety grew into a relentless obsession. He felt strange suspecting his neighbor, an old woman, of foul play. Was he losing his mind? He needed to know why Sandra was hoarding junk food and what connection it might have to his missing daughter. He decided to follow her discreetly, hoping to unravel the mystery. With a heavy heart and the weight of the unknown pressing upon him, Jacob quietly followed Mrs. Henderson as she left her home, her steps leading to the nearby supermarket. His pulse quickened with every passing moment, and as he trailed her through the supermarket's aisles, he couldn't help but wonder what secrets might lie hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary elderly neighbor. As Sandra returned from Target, Jacob quietly trailed her back to her house. Nervously, he watched as she unpacked the groceries, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt wrong for what he was doing, but he had a hunch. He had to make sure about it. Whatever the cost or risk was, he had to take it. What would he find? Jacob watched her for a few more seconds. Then, to his utter shock, Sandra's voice broke the silence. "I'm home!" she exclaimed, as though addressing someone. Did she know that he was in her house? Should he turn and run? Jacob's mind raced with questions. Who could she possibly be talking to when she lived alone? Sandra was heading upstairs. Ignoring the fear welling up inside him, Jacob followed her, each step echoing in his ears like a drumbeat. What he saw next left him breathless. There, in the upstairs bedroom, lay his daughter, Alyssa, hiding in plain sight. Her eyes met his, wide with shock and fear. Jacob's heart surged with a strange mix of relief and anger. The world seemed to spin around him as he confronted Sandra, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Why was my daughter here?" he demanded. Old Lady Sandra stuttered in her response, trying to explain her actions, but Jacob wouldn't listen. Panic and suspicion had clouded his judgment. He reached for his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking. As he spoke to the operator, Jacob's heart ached for the daughter he thought he'd lost forever. Alyssa, confused and overwhelmed, tried to explain herself, tears streaming down her face. The police arrived in a whirlwind of flashing lights and stern faces. They separated Jacob from Alyssa and Sandra, their questions swirling like a storm. Jacob recounted the bizarre discovery that had led him to this moment. While Jacob and Alyssa were reunited, Sandra's house was searched thoroughly. The officers uncovered a trail of Alyssa's belongings hidden away, evidence of her presence in the elderly woman's home. As the truth began to unravel, it turned out that 80-year-old Sandra had been lonely for years, and she had taken a liking to Alyssa's company when she saw her around the neighborhood. She had convinced Alyssa to stay with her, offering her a sense of belonging she craved. Alyssa had willingly gone along with Sandra's plan, not fully understanding the gravity of her actions. She had stayed hidden, unaware of the anguish her disappearance had caused her family. Jacob's anger turned to a mix of understanding and pity as he realized the depth of Sandra's loneliness. He couldn't condone her actions, but he also couldn't ignore the desperate need for connection that had driven her to do such a thing. In the end, the police decided not to press charges against Sandra, given her advanced age and Alyssa's willingness to stay with her. Instead, they arranged for Alyssa to receive the necessary medical attention and therapy to help her recover from the ordeal. Jacob and his wife, still grappling with the emotional roller coaster they had been through, decided to support their daughter in her healing process. They also made an effort to include Sandra in their lives, realizing the importance of community and compassion. As time passed, Alyssa's mental health improved with proper treatment and support. The experience had brought the family closer together, making them appreciate the value of their bonds more than ever before. Sandra, too, found solace in the Merriweather family's friendship. Loneliness no longer consumed her, and she became a cherished friend to Jacob, Alyssa, and their whole neighborhood. The story of Alyssa's disappearance and her unlikely rescue became a local legend, a reminder of the power of compassion and the need for human connection in a world that often leaves people feeling isolated. Teenagers are more susceptible to sudden outbursts as they grow up. Her parents learned an important lesson and didn't let her out of their sight for a while.